not to, in summation, draw with any particular level of detail the very valuable insights that were shared today and experiences that were shared today. In general, some recurrent themes that came through instead will be flagged. But I want to assure participants, contributors, that we will be developing quite a comprehensive report, and a lot of that detail then will be recorded in that report. I think for us what came through very critically in this dialogue has been a word that was repeated in every single presentation, and so I start with that important word first. It links quite significantly to everything else and to how we deliver. The first and most important theme that came through was the issue of oversight. It came through in every presentation, and it linked also with what appeared to be solutions as we drilled down to what were the weaknesses in respect of oversight. Participation was flagged, communication and transparency, levels of cooperation together with communication and transparency between departments, within CPFs, stakeholders in civil society, institutions supporting democracy like the Human Rights Commission and the IEC, regulatory bodies like IFID, research bodies like StatsSA and so forth. The issue of professionalism was also quite a marked indicator in our input. The issues of consequence management, monitoring and evaluation, and certainly policy. In relation to policy, issues around the identification of pressure points, the identification of how resources are allocated, and what kind of strategic business intelligence is placed on data, and what kind of impact does a human rights perspective bring to how we interrogate data for the purposes of resource allocation and improved service delivery. We also acknowledged and affirmed the information the SAPS itself shared with us. From Advocate Kohli, some thoughts around structures, models, and decentralization, and testing whether this is indeed an effective and efficient means of oversight and delivery. Looking at reforms in terms of training and professionalization. Particular attention was marked with LGBTI persons and guidelines. And for us, and what was very significant in that discourse was that there was an expression of a will to receive criticism, to receive input, and perhaps to reflect on it. The important issue then must be, how do we translate that will, and how is that will communicated to the level of the coalface of delivery? Concerns were also expressed and shared around something that the Commission has been engaging on for a long time, is how we ourselves view the police, and do the police see themselves as people worthy of human rights protections, their own dignity in the course of developing their professionalism, and does the dignity and self-respect start with police as individuals, both in respect of their ability to abide by the laws of the country. So issues of corruption, enforcement, self-discipline were also flagged repeatedly. The inputs we received from some of the technical experts were also extremely helpful in mapping out the issues that rise to the surface, the macro issues. We heard from UN specialists like Professor Christoph Haynes that there are inconsistencies in the number of laws we have, and these inconsistencies create ambiguity for enforcers, for implementers. There is a need then to harmonize this legislation, or perhaps to identify and then harmonize this legislation. But more significantly, to look at the opportunity that is being presented now, both at the level of the region and internationally, in the form of the guidelines and tools and protocols that are coming through, which appear to provide helpful standards by which we can reevaluate that which exists in our domestic environment to strengthen these frameworks. I understand that what I'm sharing really is quite a significant oversimplification of the very, very comprehensive information we received. But I'm hopeful and looking forward to the report, which the Commission undertakes to share with you. And I think what we would benefit from now is to hear from you, what were your flags? What are you taking away from this dialogue, this conversation? What recommendations do you have, if any? There are certainly recommendations for the South African Human Rights Commission. Some recommendations came through in the course of presentations. Issues around how the SAPS engages with civil society partners, what reliance can be placed on that kind of input. Are there opportunities for a dedicated human rights directorate within the SAPS? What level of accountability is there within the SAPS to Chapter 9 institutions or to the parliamentary committees? And I suppose that was the heartening indicator, is that when the Honourable Member presented, there was a clear indication that an awareness exists, that consequence management in the form of payments in civil claims are a concern, but a deeper concern must be the compressed fiscus and the financial environment in which we are operating, which will perhaps result in more of a strain on much needed resources. And how is the SAPS using technology to address some of the deficits and mitigate these consequences in its delivery? So I think it's heartening. There are lots of very promising signs. Protocols are being developed. There is a mindfulness about the need to monitor and evaluate. There's some identification of vulnerable groups and certain measures being put in place to address these vulnerable groups. But for bodies like the Human Rights Commission, the question is always going to be, is how well and how effectively is the SAPS reaching the at-risk communities, children on farms, farm workers? How is the SAPS going to respond to the recommendations by this Chapter 9 in respect of the early warning systems, intergovernmental collaboration we raised around the Vuwani protest matters? What is the SAPS going to do in the wake of Marikana? How have resource audits been conducted for police or public order policing, equipping police, falling back on this precautionary measure that Professor Haynes talked about? So there are a number of questions and a number of opportunities to build on slow but steady advancements that have already been achieved. And it's open now for us to create this stage, this opportunity, to flag for us in the short and medium term what would be significant issues to deal with. And so I'm going to open the floor to hear your thoughts and inputs. And I think because we've had a pretty informal sort of engagement today, yesterday and today, I'm not going to pin you down and start from one side. So by a show of hands, please.